Greetings, and welcome to my channel. I'm the Anunnaki Theorist. This video has been a long time coming. I've mentioned it, the context of this video, in my previous videos. I kept saying, I'm sorry, I have to, pull things out of context because I didn't talk about this. Today, I am going to talk about this. I am going to talk about the Incarnations of Marduk. Now, Incarnations of Marduk is kind of a misnomer, because what I'm going to show is a lot of the characters, a lot of the quote-unquote deities of our ancient ancestors that is Marduk is not an incarnation. It's not something where he died and was reborn. These are more personas based on different cultures. It was the same being. It's just in the different cultures that he represented, that he was the deity of, they called him something different, but he didn't die and be reborn for that. Okay, so the Incarnations of Marduk, we're going to go ahead and start at the beginning. Now, this is the timeline according to Zecharia Sitchin. I would still like to know where he gets a lot of his information, because this timeline spans 4.5 billion years. So, it would be very interesting to see his notes and see where he gets a lot of this. Okay, so Marduk is the oldest son of Enki. And his mother is Damkina, who is the daughter of Alelu. And originally, Enki was supposed to marry Ninmah, which is his half-sister. And that was supposed to be able to essentially generate the offspring that would be next in line for the throne. Need to go off on a little bit of a tangent because there need to be something known here. There's what is known as the law of the seed. Now, what this is normal succession. The normal line of succession for the throne of royalty. And they do this here on Earth, but even on Nibiru, where it is usually the firstborn is next in line. But at a time before Anu, when one of the other kings of Nibiru, where the succession was in debate, it was brought up that the purer the bloodline, the more relevant to being next in line for succession should be. So it was stated that if a king had an offspring by one of his blood relatives, usually a half-sister, this would be more relevant, more appropriate for the next in line, regardless of the order of birth. Okay, so with Enki was born first. He was the oldest son of Anu and Antu. Well, not Antu. It was Anu and a concubine. But then Enlil was born, and he was born of Anu and Antu, who was a half-sister of Anu. And so he was next in line. Now, it says here that Damkina and Enki begat Marduk and prepped him to rule Nibiru. And the reason why is, yes, Enlil would have been next in line, but Anu wasn't going to die or step down anytime soon. So it would have been the offspring of Anu. So essentially his grandchildren would be the ones that would be groomed to be next in line. And since Enki was the first one to have a child, it was that child that would have been prepped and groomed for the succession. Now, this is a bone of contention for Marduk, and we will get into that later on into the discussion. Okay, so those that know the saga, okay, you have Marduk, and Marduk was born roughly 470,000 years ago. It's a long time. Okay, so this is on Nibiru. This is when they were having the problem with their atmosphere, and they were realizing that they needed a solution. And of course, Alelu went to Earth, found gold, and in order to verify that this was done, Enki was sent to Earth to verify and things like that. And so Enki set up a base camp, and they went ahead and started extracting gold. And just like anybody that, works abroad for long periods of time, they want their family. They want their family around them. So we get it to where Enki sends for his wife. She's now titled Nenki, which means Lady of Earth, and Marduk. And this was roughly 440,000 years ago. Now, here's something to wrap your mind around. And this one actually kind of gave me a bit of a headache. According to Sitchin, and actually this is actually something that's according to some scientists too, the whole idea of time. On Earth, 1 year is one rotation of the Earth around the Sun. It makes one orbit, and that is a year. But a year on Nibiru, since it has an orbital period, well, at this time, it had an orbital period of 3,600 Earth years. That's what it takes to make one full rotation around the Sun, one orbit. That's 1 year. Now we've got from 2 Peter, we've got the very famous line that says that a day of God's time is 1,000 years to man. Okay, it's not quite like that, but that's where they're getting it. 1 year on heaven is 3,600 Earth years, although that has actually decreased. There was a near miss of Nibiru and Uranus at one point. This is, according to Sitchin, this is the reason why Uranus is on its side. I mean, if you look at the the planets that have rings, all the rings are sitting horizontal to the ecliptic plane. Whereas Uranus looks like it's been knocked on its side. Its rings are vertical to the ecliptic plane. And it is believed that it was one of Nibiru's orbits. It got a little too close and it just kind of wrenched Uranus over. But by doing so, it got a bit of a gravitational boost and made Nibiru's orbit something like 3,456 years or something like that. Okay, but that's nowadays. Back when Marduk was, first born, it was the 3,600 years. Okay, so like I said, this kind of gave me a headache to think about this, because how do we age? Is age dictated by our years? Literally our years. Because it was 30,000 Earth years between the time of Marduk's birth and the time that he came to Earth. And what that actually shows is that Marduk would have been 8 Nibirian years old. Does that mean that he was a child when he got to Earth? 8 Nibirian years, do they age slower because of the larger orbit? Again, this would be something that, it gave me a headache when I think about this. So, I think, yes, he was probably a child. We have nothing to really compare it to. We don't know if age is dictated by time, by the orbit of the planet around its parent star. We don't have anything, well, at least not publicly. So for trying to keep it from really giving ourselves a headache, we're going to say that yes, he was a child when he came to Earth. But when he came to Earth and he was subject to Earth's time, he aged rapidly. Now that doesn't mean too much, because as I will show, is he was still fairly old, and we'll get into that here in a minute. Okay, so we have Marduk. Now, he came here 440,000 years ago, but he wasn't actually, worshipped by mankind, of course, because, well, mankind wasn't around at that point. But according to mainstream academia, he was worshipped around the 3rd millennium BCE. So we're looking at, 3000 BCE. And he wasn't really that, he wasn't that big of a deity at first. He was primarily associated with agriculture. Now, as I stated in my Tale of Two Atoms video, it was Marduk who taught Abel. He taught Abel to be a shepherd. He taught Abel how to, take care of the animals and how to butcher them properly and, make meat for the gods. And it was after Cain killed Abel is where Marduk started to get his next attribute, his sense of justice. Now, one of the things that still is alive today, at least in a form, is the Code of Hammurabi. And this Hammurabi was a Babylonian king And there's a very famous stela, a big black rock that has the whole code written on it. And on the top, it shows Marduk being given this code by Shamash, or Utu, if you want to go with. But I think he was just a messenger. He was just the one that was delivering this code. The code actually came from Marduk. Now, the Code of Hammurabi is actually, and like I said, it survives to an extent even today. This was the start of Republic. Now, I know mainstream academia likes to say that we got Republic from the Greeks. But Babylon was before Greece. And where I talk about the whole idea of Cain and Abel, where Marduk becomes this dealer of justice. Of course, his justice is an eye for an eye, which is what we see in the Code of Hammurabi. You kill somebody, you deserve to be killed yourself. And that's what he tried to do with Cain. After Abel was killed, Marduk ordered Cain's execution. But of course, there was circumstances, and like I said, I talked about that in my Tale of Two Atoms video. Okay, so Marduk was associated with agriculture. That was his first thing. And then he was associated with justice. Okay. Remember I told you about the bone of contention that Marduk had. The whole idea that he believed that he should be next in line. Well, because of that, it created a lot of douchebaggery that he went through. He was always getting in trouble. And in fact, he got in trouble so bad that they banished him. They sent him to the Americas. Now, if it was North America, it was southern North America. Okay, so we're looking at essentially the Mesoamerican region. And what we see there is we see the Olmec society, or civilization. Now, we don't know a lot about the Olmecs, because there is no written record. They didn't have any writing. They didn't have text. Unlike the next Mesoamerican empire that would have arose, and that's the Mayans. And we have information about the Mayans because of the Popol Vuh. So that, there's surviving text of the Mayans. But unfortunately, we don't have anything about the Olmecs. However, we do know they had a grain god, a maize deity. And it's my belief that this would have been Marduk. When he was banished the first time, he went to the Americas and he was the maize god of the Olmecs. Now, the interesting thing about the Olmec society, this is where we get those huge stone heads that look nothing like the natives in the area. Nothing. In fact, they looked Nubian, African. So when he was banished, he probably didn't go by himself. He probably took some slaves, some servants. And they would have been Nubian. They would have been African because of the whole Mesopotamian area that he originally came from. Okay. I'm going to go in a little side note. You've got Bel. And this is famous from Bel and the Dragon, which is just another retelling of the Enuma Elish. This is the whole idea of Marduk slaying Tiamat. Now, in that particular interpretation, that is Marduk, or it's supposed to be Nibiru, but Marduk is seen as the force of order, and Tiamat is chaos. And Marduk defeats the dragon, defeats Tiamat, and brings order to the cosmos. He also is supposed to be one that has, created mankind. And again, this is Babylonian, so him being the chief deity of Babylon, they would have elevated him higher than what he actually was. In the Enuma Elish, it states that, Marduk created man, but we've got older texts, Sumerian texts, that talk about Enki and Ninmah creating man. So, yeah, we get into this a lot. We get into the whole idea of usurping things in order to elevate Marduk higher than what he actually should be. Okay. So, Bel is pretty much always associated with Marduk. The next persona of Marduk would be Mithra. Again, not an incarnation. He hasn't died yet. He's just gone to these different regions and different cultures, and he's presented himself as a deity, and the deity that you see him as, especially like this is the Iranian deity. This is essentially Zoroaster. But he is seen, he is Mithra, and this is where he actually gets his third attribute. Remember, I said agriculture, justice, and now the third attribute. And this is where he's starting to pull away from the Enkyites, from the Serpent Clan. Because the Serpent Clan has always been about the moon. They were always moon deities. But with Mithra, we get him to where he's starting to be more associated with the sun. Because you have, it says, Mithra, or Mir, is the Iranian deity of covenant, light, oath, justice, and the sun. But he is also the guardian of cattle, the harvest, and of the waters. So we have all three of his attributes here: agriculture, justice, and the sun. Okay. Again, none of these are incarnations. He hasn't died yet. These are just personas. Okay. Now, Marduk was given control of Kemet. Now, I got into Kemet when I got into the Incarnations of Thoth. Okay. Kemet was what Egypt was called before it became Egypt. Okay. So he was given control of Egypt, and he was Ra. Well, Kemet. He was given control of Kemet. Now, of course, again, he starts his douchebaggery, and he gets banished again. Now, in Kemet, they worshipped Ra. But when he was banished and he was no longer walking amongst his people, he became Amun, which means hidden or secret. And then, of course, he was brought back. His banishment was lifted. And Thoth was sitting on the throne of Kemet. And Marduk comes in and is like, hey, look, you were just my cupbearer. You were my placeholder. You need to get out of my throne, get out of my country, and give me my kingdom back. And of course, there was a war. And finally, Ptah Enki told Thoth to go ahead and give his brother back his land. And Thoth, being the dutiful son that he was, dutiful, obedient son, he went ahead and left. And Ra became Amun-Ra at this point. Now, here it states that it says that the two deities, Amun and Ra, they were two separate deities, according to mainstream academia, according to Egyptologists. But eventually he was fused to be Amun-Ra. Well, we have that explanation as to why that was. He was originally Ra, then when he was banished he was Amun, and then when he came back he was Amun-Ra. Now, after Ra, again, here we see the sun. We see the Aten. Now, I am going to have to take something out of context because I have not gone into the incarnations of Nabu. Nabu is Marduk's son. Remember, I talked about how in my last video that Marduk took a human wife. He took Sharpanet as his wife, and they had Nabu. Nabu was a hybrid. Half god, half human. Well, Marduk would have taught Nabu ascension, and because Nabu was born on Earth, he was half human, he would have died before Marduk. But he was taught ascension, which Marduk learned, and I think where Marduk would have learned ascension is he would have learned it, well, either during one of his banishments or as something that I'm going to propose that has to do with Aten, that has to do with Akhenaten, is at this time, or before, slightly before, Marduk made an alliance with another extraterrestrial species. Now, the Anunnaki were not the only ones here. There are many cultures, ancient cultures, probably more ancient than even some of the cultures that I talk about, that have created petroglyphs and rock art, rock painting, that show these other beings that were here on Earth. So it's my belief that Marduk made an alliance with the Zetas, aka the Greys. Now the Greys, they're all about genetic engineering. This is supposed to be the reason why they do the abductions, and they do the alleged hybrid program that ufologists and those that are in the alien phenomenon talk about. So at this point, Marduk and his family line are in league with the Greys. So, as I stated in my Great Spark commentary, where I talk about that everything vibrates, the soul vibrates, and our body vibrates, and in order for the soul to inhabit a body, it has to vibrate at the same frequency. So the Greys would have been able to create a hybrid body that would allow Nabu's soul to inhabit. Now, when we get into the idea of Aten, Aten was taught by Akhenaten. And when we see Akhenaten, he does not look human. Now, one of the things that is always pointed out to us is that when a pharaoh was depicted in these images, in these carvings, they were usually depicted as these, mighty, powerful. These were supposed to be, the offspring or the reincarnation of God, And so they were usually depicted as something other than what they weren't. But Akhenaten made sure that when he was depicted, he looked exactly like what he looked like in real life. And when we see these images, he does not look human. His head is elongated. It's almost almond shaped. His eyes are big. He is the stereotypical human gray hybrid. And it's my belief that it's because of this alliance with the Greys that Marduk created, and this body was created for his son. Now, the Anunnaki were leaving. They were going to leave, and unfortunately they didn't really shut down their cult centers. And Marduk kind of swooped in. And he's like, hey, I'm still here. There are no other gods. I am the only God. Thou shalt have no other God but me. Now, when the Anunnaki left, Marduk's banishment, or his exile, was still in force. So he kind of usurped pretty much all of the cults that were there. And he basically said this famous line, and it's not necessarily that he actually said this. This comes from Milton's Paradise Lost. But it says, better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. Well, he wasn't allowed back to Nibiru anymore. But it wasn't hell that he was going to reign. It was earth. And and how he was going to do that was he was going to usurp all of the cults that were already out there that weren't shut down. And he was going to create monotheism. And that's what we get with the Aten. We get the rise of monotheism. Okay, one of his other personas, and this is a possible, and of course this would have been when he's starting to go away from not so much looking out for the benefit of mankind. Now, with Moloch, there are a few things that are kind of in debate of, first of all, was Moloch an actual being? Was he a deity? Or did it actually, mean just a form of sacrifice? And then, of course, the depictions of Moloch are the bull. And the bull is more associated with Enlil. But this is also at a time when he's starting to usurp. So anything that would be, of the bull would have been something that he would have been taking over. Yahweh is Enlil. Well, Marduk usurped that. He started to making it to where he was Yahweh. He was the Lord. I mean, that's what Bel means. It means Lord. So he gave rise to monotheism. There's another thing that he gave rise to. And those individuals, especially in today's culture, when we get into the idea of female rights and things like this, we get the idea of the patriarchy. You can blame Marduk for that. Marduk hated women. Okay? After his wife, Sharpanet, he loved her. But he kept getting screwed over by the different Anunnaki females. He got screwed over by Nenma. He got screwed over by Ereshkigal. He got screwed over by Inanna. He hated women. And so in every one of his cultures, he started denigrating women. He elevated men in every one of his cultures, made it to where women were seen as the bane of existence. This is the reason why we get the idea that Eve was the bad woman. She was the one that first took the temptation, took the apple and gave it to Adam. She made Adam sin. That's not what happened, but that's the way that Marduk set it up. He set it up to where they had the patriarchy, the male-dominated society. You can blame Marduk for that. Okay. As I stated, Marduk was starting to usurp all of the religions, trying to bring it into one monotheistic belief. Now, everything's all hunky-dory. People are worshiping him, even though they don't actually realize it. They think they're worshiping Yahweh or some other deity, but they're actually worshiping him because he's the only one here. He's the only one that would actually be able to hear anybody's prayers. Because all the others, they were gone. They were back on Nibiru. They were in heaven. And all the communications devices were silent. Those things that we see as religious icons, more than likely, in the beginning, they were essentially communications devices. And they were silent. But Marduk was here. And he took on the roles. He took on the personas. And this is one of the things that we get into. When we get into Marduk, Marduk supposedly has 50 names. Okay? Those 50 names are his attributes. They are the things that he took on because he was now taking on all the roles, all the duties, all the responsibilities, and all the worshipers of all the other gods. This is the rise of monotheism. So everything's all hunky-dory. Everybody's worshiping him. And then here comes his little brother. Here comes Thoth, reincarnated as Yeshua, as Jesus Christ. And he starts teaching mankind about ascension. Now, it's a mistranslation, it's a misinterpretation that he was talking about heaven. No, he wasn't talking about heaven. He was talking about ascension, just as he has done in every one of his incarnations. He states that you have to be born again. This is not a figurative being born again. This is not a spiritual being born again. This is a physical reincarnation, being born again. That's what he's talking about. Now, I'm not going to put it in here, but you can go look it up. And if you have not read it or had somebody read it to you, like on a YouTube video or whatever, I encourage you to read the Gospel for Judas. Now, it's not the Gospel of Judas. Gospel means good work. It's not the good word of Judas. In other words, talking about somebody else. Because that's the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The good word of. It is the Gospel for Judas. In the Gospel for Judas, Judas is not the bad guy that everybody thinks he is. He's actually the only one that truly knows who Jesus is. And when he tells Jesus that he knows who he is, Jesus starts telling him about the cosmos. This reads almost like science fiction. Okay, so back to Marduk. Now, we're going to go back in here to the timeline according to Zecharia Sitchin. Here's the 440,000 years ago. This is when Marduk first came to Earth. We come all the way down here. Like I said, all the way down here. Because a lot of time has passed. Right, gotta get this thing to load up. Yes, eat my RAM. Eat my RAM. Alright. Okay, so. Remember, I said that these were personas. These weren't actual incarnations. We don't actually get another incarnation of Marduk until 480 BCE. When Marduk dies. Now, I did the calculations. Marduk died around 480 BCE. He was 130 Nibirian years old. That's 468,000 Earth years. Yeah, remember how I told you that would give you a headache? Yeah. When I did that calculation, yeah, that gave me a headache. Okay, so now Marduk is dead. And then you get his little brother coming in and basically knocking down everything that he worked so hard to build, the whole monotheistic faith. And now you've got Jesus sitting there saying, oh, well, you can't get to my Father except through me. So no longer the focus on the monotheistic deity. It is now on this intermediary. Marduk's not going to tolerate this. So he reincarnates as Nero. Nero is known for destroying Christians. And that's the reason why. In my Mark of the Beast video, I already showed that Nero is the beast. He is the reincarnation of Marduk. And the reason why he came back is because he set up this beautiful monotheistic belief system where he was being worshipped, and then his little brother comes and screws it all up. And so, to try to deter other people from joining this, well, what he considered a cult, he started killing Christians. Okay. I'm going to go into a few possibles. We get a faith called Catharism, Catharism. And they talk about a being known as Rex Mundi. And Rex Mundi is supposed to be this creator god that creates physical matter. Now, Yahweh, or whatever version of the creator god, is supposed to have been the one that created the spiritual matter, essentially your soul. But Rex Mundi creates physical matter, a body that houses the soul. Now, I'm going to bring up the Gospel for Judas again. When Jesus is talking to Judas, and Judas is sitting there saying, you know, I know that you are not from earth. I know that you were sent by, or you came from, a place or person known as Barbalos. And so Jesus starts talking to Judas, and he says that, okay, the God that the disciples are worshiping is not my Father. There is not the God that they think it is. This is a evil creator deity known as Saklas. This would be Rex Mundi. A creator deity that creates physical matter, that traps or holds the spiritual matter that God created. Another possible would be Prometheus. Now, before I get into Prometheus, I mean, some people, they know about Prometheus. He was a Titan. In the Greek mythologies, the Titans were before the Olympians. The Olympians are Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, all that, okay? But the Titans were first. And it was the Olympians that actually defeated the Titans. But Prometheus is a Titan, and after man was created, well, he created mankind. He created, and he was the champion for mankind. Now, he created mankind. Zeus got pissed because he created mankind. So Zeus made sure that mankind was going to stay primitive. They weren't going to have, anything. But Prometheus stole fire from Zeus, stole fire from Olympus, and gave it to mankind. Okay, this is something that we see when we look at the fallen angels. Those the Agigi that I talked about in my last video. And their commander was Marduk. And the one thing that the fallen angels did for their offspring and for the rest of humanity is they gave them technology. They gave them metallurgy, they gave them weaponsmithing, they gave them war. And this is basically, side by side with what Prometheus did. He gave mankind fire, but it wasn't just fire, it was everything that comes with fire. I mean, not only are you using it to keep yourself warm and give yourself light and cook, but eventually you use fire to create the forge that creates the weapons. Okay, well, in the story of Prometheus, he is punished and he is bound and he does eventually die. But then we get into Zeus. Zeus is essentially a trinity. Zeus is three beings in one. Zeus originally was Enlil. And we see that in the way that Zeus was born. Zeus wasn't the first. Gaia and Kronos, they had two others. They had Poseidon and Hades. And Kronos, of course, swallowed them. And it was Zeus who was basically the younger brother that Gaia raised, and he went and took care of Kronos and got his brothers out. Now, Poseidon, in the Greek pantheon, is Enki. And just like in the Sumerian, Enki was first. He is the older brother. But Zeus, Enlil, stepped back. His age was over. The age of Taurus was over. And it was dawning into the age of Aries, which is the age of Marduk. So Marduk usurped Zeus. And he's no longer seen as Prometheus. Prometheus supposedly died. He didn't. That's the mythology. But he usurped Zeus. He became Zeus. This is the reason why Alexander the Great, and again, going out of context, Incarnation of Nabu, Alexander the Great. This is the reason why the oracle told him, hey, your father is Zeus. Or in some interpretations, your father is Marduk. And this is the reason why, because Marduk usurped Zeus. Now, I said Zeus was a trinity. I don't know why they did this, but neither Enlil nor Marduk, either one of them, were lecherous. They didn't go have intimate relations with mortals. Enlil didn't, and Marduk didn't. Like I said, Marduk hated women. But they gave the attribute that is frickin' Enki. They gave his promiscuity, his lecherous nature, they gave it to Zeus. I don't know why. Now, Poseidon wasn't exactly, a faithful god. I mean, he did have some lecherous attributes as well. But they gave the majority of it to Zeus. I don't know. Okay, so those are the possibles. Now we're going to get into what he is most known for, and that is he is the Hasatan. He is Satan. Satan and Lucifer are two separate things. Let's get that straight. Okay, Lucifer is actually Enki, the morning star, which that's what Lucifer means. It means morning star. The morning star is Enki. But Satan, the Hasatan, which just means accuser, the adversary, the opponent. This is Hebrew. They have many different definitions for one word. But the Hasatan, I mean, it finally just became a name. Satan. Now, we get into... This is written by Wes Penray. This is where... And I'm not going to get too much into this because I'm really going to go in depth with this in my next video. But this is where we're talking about that Satan is on earth. Satan has control over most of the earth. And we get into the Code of Hammurabi, which gives us Republic, which comes from Marduk. He has most of the earth. And the thing is, those things that he doesn't have control of. And this is going to get me a lot of hate. Because Marduk gave us Republic. Those nations, those kingdoms that are considered enemies of democracy are the ones that he does not have control of. So he doesn't reign Earth completely, but he has the vast majority of it. And a lot of people don't realize it. So I will go into that a lot more in my next video. So who is he now? Hey, I've talked a lot about Michael Lee Hill and how he supposedly met Marduk. But who is he? Now, one of the things that Michael Lee Hill stated is the first time that he met Marduk, Marduk didn't look quite human. But when he had dinner with him, he looked human. He just had the stereotypical deity blue eyes. But I already stated that he has this alliance with the Greys. So I believe that the Greys have created him a hybrid body. And he has minor shape-shifting ability. And, I mean, I'm not going to go too much into it, but since they are his allies, they're going to fight on his side when the return comes. But again, who is he? I actually had somebody in my comment section on my Facebook page that said they knew who Marduk was. And, you know, I asked him, I was like, really? No, do tell. Who is he? Because honestly, I don't know. I look at the world today, and he is like so low key. It's like he's not any prominent figure, as far as I can tell. The closest that I can see is the dragon, Elon Musk. But I don't think that's Marduk. If anything, that's maybe an incarnation of Nabu. But even then, if that would be the case, he's kind of going outside of what he normally incarnates as, which is a warrior and a leader. So who is he today? It'd be interesting to find that out. That's the Incarnations of Marduk. I'm the Anunnaki theorist. Enjoy.